like to put a bow on this thing, tidying up loose ends from the break on In My Own Words, the podcast, the hottest form, best form of Alabama football news, notes, and information. Yours truly, Stephen Smith. I'm back from my trip to Columbia, South Carolina. Crimson Tide getting a 47-23 win over the Gamecocks on last week. And though the team transitioning to its matchup for Southern Miss this weekend inside Bryant-Denny Stadium, we actually had a great week of shows. We were able to discuss the first-round guys defensively in terms of Alabama for the Touchdown Alabama Magazine draft projections. And from there, we dove into the aspects, that were going to be needed for the Crimson Tide in this matchup against South Carolina. But now we tidy up loose ends by recapping or going into the things that stood out to me from the matchup between Nick Saban and the Tide versus Will Muschamp and those Gamecocks. But prior to that, as always, got to give a shout out here to our sponsors, as In My Own Words, the podcast is being brought to you by Title Towel. This is the rally towel with benefits for the avid Alabama sports fan. Title Towel is only $9.99 and it lasts a lifetime. So if you've got pride and purpose for all things Bama, be sure to show that pride and purpose as you twirl Title Towel in the air like you just don't care. You go to whitwillsports.com. That's WHITWILSPORTS. whitwillsports.com, and get you a couple of those towels today. But the things that stood out to me from Alabama's matchup with South Carolina, I know people still having their concerns with the offensive line and in terms of showing balance, having a consistent run game. Crimson Tide against South Carolina only had or rushed the ball 25 times for 76 yards, averaged just 3 yards per carry with one touchdown. The score came on a quarterback sneak from Mac Jones. And just, to me, these guys aren't slouches. Chris Owens, Emil Ikior, Evan Neal, Matt Womack, Landon Dickerson, and guys like Cedric Wills and Alex Leatherwood, these guys aren't slouches. A lot of these players were 4- and 5-star prospects upon coming to the University of Alabama. So this is a very talented offensive line. The question is, what is hindering the Crimson Tide from putting out 5 linemen and allowing these guys to learn themselves, learn the individual that's lined up next to them, grow some chemistry, grow some continuity with the 5 you got in the field? Because in the 3 weeks so far of the season, the Tide has not had one 100-yard rusher. It has not had that bell cow. But at the same time, you don't know who are going to be your guys on the offensive line each and every week, because in the last 3 games, there's been a different guy at right guard. There's been a different guy at left guard. There's been a different guy at center. And I understand sometimes injuries play into these things happening, but at the same time, you being Nick Saban and offensive line coach Kyle Flood, you got to find the 5 guys you are willing to commit to those 5, get them on the field, get them coached up, get the chemistry and that continuity, because it all starts with the offensive line. The RPO scheme is good. Tua Tagovailoa is playing out of his mind. He is doing a phenomenal job, efficient, effective, targeting guys, whipping the ball around like clockwork. But Alabama's got to find a way to provide some balance to help Tua out, because you need a run game. You need something that resembles a consistent run game to make Tua that much more dominant. And having just 76 yards rushing on 25 carries, that's not going to cut the mustard. Got to be able to run the football, especially when you're going to come against defenses like LSU down the road, Auburn down the road, Mississippi State down the road, who always tends to play Alabama extremely physical. And then depending on which Texas A&M team takes the field at College Station upon Alabama playing the Aggies, you got to have somewhat of a strong run game. So for the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban, Cal Flood got to get the linemen on the field that you are comfortable with. That's just offensively. Defensively, Bama's got to stop the run. Rico Dowdle, South Carolina's back, had over 100 yards rushing in the matchup on 12 carries. You got to give the offensive coordinator for the Gamecocks a ton of credit, mixing up the scheme and helping true freshman quarterback Ryan Helinski, feel comfortable. They had a mixture of short passes, runs, just different maneuvers, different motions to keep the Tide's defense off balance, out of sync at times, while keeping South Carolina ahead of schedule. Now, Alabama's defense, when it got down to the red area, it did stiffen up. It did hold the Gamecocks to field goals more times than not until towards the end, to where Justin Aboigbe at defensive end did get pressure to Helinski. Unfortunately, Alakeho at weak side linebacker caught in the wrong spot. Tight end was able to make a catch and score a touchdown on that particular play. But for the most part, aside from penalties and missed tackles, Alabama's defense was not terrible. I understand it's not the defense that a lot of people have grown used to seeing in terms of just the dominance, but times have changed in terms of teams are going more toward these high-powered offenses. I mean, you look at the New England Patriots for a prime example. The program's got 6 Super Bowls in the National Football League, but the last 2 or 3 of them were done by precision passing from Tom Brady and just good play on offense, but defense bend but don't break, so to speak. It had moments of brilliance. It had moments where it'll give yards here, it give yards there, but in terms of giving up a bunch of points, it had moments where it stood and not give up a bunch of points, bend but don't break. And to some degree, this is what this defense is going to look like when you have the likes of Dylan Moses out for the season, Joshua McMillan out for the season, and now LeBron Ray, who has a foot injury, will miss the Southern Miss game and possibly more games behind that. So defensively, not completely terrible is Alabama, but some things to clean up, and they'll have a chance to do that this week against Southern Miss. But offensive line, got to establish a run game, got to get a cohesive 5 on the field and stick with it. Defense, just some things as far as tackling, not having the penalties, some mental errors to clean up. When you move on down to the second thing that stood out to me from the matchup, how about the game by Najee Harris? I mentioned in the aspects that were needed for the Crimson Tide, Alabama needed a big game from Harris, and the former 5-star from California stepped up. Now, in the run game, only had 7 carries for 36 yards, did press the hole pretty well on a couple of those runs, but as a receiver, boy, did Air Najee take flight. We're talking 5 catches for 87 yards, tied a team high with 2 touchdowns, averaged 17.4 yards per catch, and had a 42-yard touchdown where it's 4th down and 3. Alabama, Nick Saban does not like to see Najee hurdling guys because it's dangerous, could lead to getting them hurt. And I remember prior to the season starting that, Harris told reporters, I'm going to cut that hurdling out. I'm not going to hurdle this year. But sometimes a brother's got to do what a brother's got to do. And when you catch the football and you see open field and all the moments from your freshman year and your sophomore year of college, then your high school years, they all hit you at the same time, instincts just come out. And 4th and 3, boy, was it beautiful or what? He makes a catch, stiff arms the guy on the ground, hurdles the other guy, maintains his balance, gets in the end zone. I mean, fans are blown away. Commentators are blown away. Najee himself probably blown away. Gamecock fans are using words that I can't use on this platform, but it was gorgeous. It was a work of athletic poetry in motion as Najee Harris making a big-time play. And the whole game, the young man, 12 touches for 123 yards from scrimmage, had 2 touchdowns. Big game from Najee Harris. Moving on down to the third thing that stood out to me from the matchup, Devante Smith. Another thing I mentioned in the aspects. Smitty. We've had big performances from Jerry Jeudy, one from Henry Ruggs, one from Jalen Waddle, of course, against Duke. We were waiting on one from Smitty, and half of 2nd and 26 showed over the weekend that connection between him and Tua Tagovailoa, alive and well. The young man, 8 catches, career high for 136 receiving yards, career high, 2 touchdowns, averaged 17 yards per catch on 12 targets. 6 of his 8 receptions went for either first downs or touchdowns, and Smitty for his career. How about the brother? 1,086 receiving yards and 12 touchdowns. His 42-yard touchdown catch. He put some moves on a couple of Gamecock defenders getting to the end zone. So Smitty, the third thing that stood out. The fourth standout to me, folks, I mentioned this. South Carolina's got some dudes. And I said I wrote in an article preview of this game that the Gamecocks would challenge Alabama. This was a game that the Tide needed. Now, of course, South Carolina's head coach, Will Muschamp, he's a ticking time bomb. He's a couple of eggs short of an omelet. I don't know how long this brother's going to be in Columbia, South Carolina, but in terms of just the talent that program recruits, they got talent. They got about 6 to 7 guys or more that will hear their name called by Roger Goodell for the NFL draft. And a good bit of those guys were on display over the weekend, and they played ball. They challenged Alabama. They pushed Alabama. They gave the Tide all it could handle, especially on defense, as Alabama was on the field for 86 plays, and this was something the Tide needed, especially these young players, these freshmen, so they can see the tape, learn from the film, build off of it, and use it as a teachable moment to develop and grow and get better. So a challenge from South Carolina. Alabama learned from that, and that was the fourth thing that stood out to me. So running back for these again, the 4 things that I saw from this matchup, number 1, offensive line and defense as a whole. Offensive line, got to establish your 5 guys from here on out and get a running game going. Defensive-wise, cutting out the penalties, being able to stop the run, cleaning up the mental mistakes. The second thing that stood out, Najee Harris, the young man took flight, especially in the passing game, had a big time performance against South Carolina. Number 3, Devante Smith. Smitty got that 100-yard outing. Career moment for him. And last but not least, number 4, South Carolina challenging the Crimson Tide. And it was a much-needed challenge for Alabama as it continues with the rest of the schedule moving forward, starting off with Southern Miss this weekend. Folks, that's going to do it here for this edition of Shows in My Own Words. As always, people, you check out the Touchdown Alabama Magazine app. Do that today. You download it from the iPhone App Store. You're rocking Team Apple. Google Play Store if you got the Android phone. Podcast options, as always, at the bottom of the screen. You subscribe to TDAlabamaMag.com for all the latest. And subscribe to Touchdown Alabama Magazine on YouTube. Get with the site, over 1 million video views, over 5,000 subscribers strong, thanks to you, the fans. When we return to start next week's edition of Shows, we will dive into who will be the guy to step up in the absence of LeBron Ray this week against Southern Miss and probably moving forward. For all of us here at Touchdown Alabama Magazine, I'm yours truly, Stephen M. Smith. Till next time, folks, you've been listening to In My Own Words. What's up, college football fans? You can catch the show every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Subscribe to get all the news, notes, and information covering your Alabama Crimson Tide.